Right, I think most of us are sat down now, so going to pass you over to Liam from Nexus Studios.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, you don't have to. No, it's fine. I really allow this right before you do that. Yeah, thank you. I really was not expecting this many people. Like, genuinely wasn't expecting anyone to come out tonight. So I'm Creative Technology Director at Nexus Studios, who are over in Shoreditch. We're about a 20-year-old studio. And this talk has got a lot of overlap with Rivka's talk in that it's basically 20 years of that panic of like not quite knowing what you're doing and then sort of learning new stuff. I've tried to sort of give it a more graceful title. This is all about like surfing the waves of novelty as technology life cycles change. But I'm going to quickly show you some Nexus work so that you at least have some credibility in terms of talking about this stuff.
Why you had to hide away for so long? Where did we go wrong? Mr. Blue Sky, please tell us.
I'm going to cut it short though, because I'm trying to condense the talk down and make sure everyone does get to the pub nice and early, in case you do have better places to be. But I'm going to show the interactive work. That's where I am. I'm doing mostly mixed reality stuff these days, little bits of AI, like creative coding, some installations, still the sort of like the WebGL stuff, but like most of my career I've liked the weird end of interactive stuff, like Rivka, sort of graphic design-y background. I studied interactive media, but like in the CD-ROM era. So yeah, that was, 20 years of this, and like so many of the things I got good at are dead now. So all of those will be running real time, like those are interactive pieces. We try and make the stuff not look very video gamey, so yeah, it's like that. But what I'm going to talk to you a bit today is the hype cycle. So this is a contrivance to like give the talk a sense of cohesion, but this is an actual thing that a management consultancy company made, and they talk about all the time, called the hype cycle. And in theory, all technologies basically fit in this curve where there's some initial technology trigger, like some new thing gets invented, and they emerge and like they capture the imagination, and there's like a rise in expectations for it, like, oh, blockchain is going to change our lives. And it sort of like rises up the slope on the left-hand side to what's called genuinely the peak of inflated expectations at the top, where people think this is going to be amazing. And remember, like I've lived through the CD-ROM era, the dot-com crash, like all this stuff. Like, yeah, pretty much all of this stuff happens. It then slides down the slope into the trough of disillusionment. Again, none of this is a joke. This is genuinely what these things are called. And then the slope of enlightenment, as there's normally some value in any piece of technology, and like it's not completely useless, and everyone just sort of just calms the fuck down about it and like finds the value in what they're doing. And then there's a sort of plateau of productivity where it sort of levels out. And I remember like even the web, where it was amazing, it's going to things, all this money is thrown into it, the web, people talk about internet, and then it's sort of down the bottom, it's just like, oh, people are just putting their brochures online. Like, and it sort of crashed, and there stopped being so much money, and maybe pets.com isn't going to be the next Amazon because there's only one Amazon. By and large, though, the web sort of like crawled its way back up, and people saw that there's real value in it, and it's frankly changed all our lives. And then you've got the plateau of productivity where, with a few noticeable exceptions, most of the time websites kind of look the same, and I'm not really interested anymore. That happened to me with apps, that happened to me with a bunch of stuff. CD-ROMs not so much, like sometimes things just die. Um, so here's where the Gartner company kind of think like everything was in 2019 when I first started like making this, getting interested in this as a concept. And these are the things that I was working on in sort of 2019. And this is according to like what the venture capitalists say. So I do a ton of AR work, and you see it's like right down the bottom because, yay, Magic Leap, like everyone sort of went, oh, this is not a good way to spend our money. And it's sort of like, it's tanked. On the other end, because so much of what I do is for digital marketing, you know, commercial art, that's how I like to think of myself in agencies, this is kind of where it is for those guys, where like there's a bunch of stuff in there that they think is kind of interesting. And so like AR and VR, as of last year, were kind of on the up for that. So the Gartner Institute make different graphs for different people where they clearly think some people are suckers, or I don't know. But like AR and VR, the hot thing, there was still a time last year where people did genuinely send blockchain briefs. They don't all move up and down the curve at the same speed. So here we are in 2020, and like you're going to hear a lot of talk about 5G and the AR cloud. And you know, the orange ones are the ones I'm actually working with. I'm not doing anything autonomous driving. GANs, like so AI, generative adversarial stuff, and emotional AI, which I put in pink because, yeah, don't do that if you're doing commercial art, because when it goes wrong, oh, it's insulting. Like if you're trying to send like a commercial message to people, it's not a good idea. Transfer learning, which is a way of doing machine learning for lazy people like me, where you take a model that kind of does what you want to do, and then you shove a load of new data on it, and then you just sort of run and see what happens. And if you want to get into machine learning, that's a nice, easy way of doing that. And see me afterwards, I'll give you some tools that even have like a GUI, so you don't have to mess with a virtual machine. 3D sensing cameras on the way down, and I use them a bunch. I didn't even know they were ever hyped up, but blockchain at the bottom, rubbish. Oh, is that not going to play video? Okay, there. So yeah, this talk is basically about like surfing those waves, and this is Memo's work, who collaborator in Nexus, and he does much better creative coding generative work than me. I'm not really trying to show a lot of my own work. It's always kind of half finished and just okay. There's value all the way along that graph, and that's kind of what I'm going to talk about, is you're going to feel like a massive fraud, an imposter, like at the very bottom edge, but that's fine because no one's doing anything there, like in our space. You just sort of jump on, and it kind of follows this timeline for us, so that there's a new thing, and then like it's in the sort of academic world and very clever people working on it. And then you'll get the nerds, well, which I mean like people who can just read a white paper that somebody else has published and maybe turn that into computer code. And if you're lucky, those guys will put something on GitHub and you can mess around with it. Which, as I've gotten better at maths as I've gotten older, that's kind of where I am often in between these two emojis, the artist and the nerd there. So I can play around with models, I can like get stuff to compile and build and play with them, and then I'm trying to immediately do art with it. And then when you're at the peak of inflated expectations, that's when people will throw money at you. And it's great when that happens, if you've been playing with it, just up the slope. Even better if you were at the very beginning and you actually know what you're doing and you can actually harness this in a usable way. But at that very top, that's a great time to actually make work for money. It's not a great time to make work that is good or moves people, because by and large you don't really know what you're doing still, and there's a bunch of pressure and everyone has really high expectations, and then as it starts going down the slope you get some very, very interesting projects, because the real brief is that the CMO wants a new job and they want like another bullet point on their LinkedIn, and they'll kind of let you do whatever as long as you use that technology. Like it's harder at the very, very top because the guys want something that may be impossible, and half of your job is to explain. And I genuinely have a folder full of some of these briefs where like, no, just like you're saying, probably don't want an AI to do that, or, well, if you think about it, if I could do that, I'd probably just take over the world. rather than sell it to you for like this small sum of money. Yeah. But like on that downward slope, there's interesting stuff you can do, but the very bottom is great because you don't have to explain to the audience how to use the tech, but also not everything is worked out, and like the interaction models and the programming paradigms are still kind of in flux, and you're figuring stuff out still, but the expectations are kind of lower, but there's still so much juice to squeeze out of the thing creatively. And that's why, like, when Gartner had AR down the bottom, I'm doing a ton of AR because there's loads of really cool stuff you can do in that space, but you also don't have to explain to the audience what AR is. And so they'll engage with the content and not the technology. An example is like I was doing stuff in VR, and this is like just a bunch of Getty image search on VR. If you're making content in VR, you very rarely put it in the sky. Like it's an uncomfortable experience for people, but you'll notice in all these things, everyone's like mouth open, gaping in the sky. That's not how you want to tell a story or actually engage with someone. Like, it's just shock value and novelty. And it's a terrible place to be as a creator because you have to fight against the audience. They're trying to break it. They're trying to do weird stuff. And you have to factor that into your creative concept. Like, when VR gets useful, we use it all the time in the studio, like just as a tool. It's not necessarily something that I imagine you were going to go home and sit on the sofa with your Valentine and both put on your VR headset and get into your own separate worlds. It's not really that. It's that's lonely, like, frankly. But if you want to work, it's way more effective than putting your headphones on. And we storyboard and stuff, so we use some tools and we make our own tools in the studio. We have directors in other continents, and like there's projects we've done that could not have been done without doing it in VR. So see if this plays, if I have to click it. So this was a literal roller coaster we made last year, like genuinely a roller coaster, and 8 weeks start to finish, like from the time like when we hung up the phone to when people had to be sitting on this thing and going around it. It's a simple roller coaster. Like I call it roller coaster, it's a bit too strong a word, but people are getting in a thing and driving around a track, and there's interactive elements. And we'll just play this one. We'll just bump it up.
Traffic's appalling. You honk and you shout.
It shows that the Google Assistant can help you through your day with very simple little help.
Slow down ahead. I've found a faster route.
The ambition was really to tell a very mundane tale in a very epic way.
Hey Google, tell me about my day.
Good morning, Bob. Don't forget Grandma's birthday cake today.
Oh, yep, we're on it. Hey Google, take me to the bakery.
The big challenge was really to be able to do something in 2 months that usually takes 3 years. We had to be very fast
2
in the
months.
design of the world, the character, very fast in programming everything, building everything. I wanted to vary the different angles, the different scale. Sometimes the characters are small, sometimes they are big, sometimes you're really immersed. We've used like all sort of immersive tricks, light, SFX like rain, smoke, smell. It smells delicious, like macaroons in the patisserie.
Yeah. Again, I'll skip through it. So on our website. Couldn't have been done without VR. And what VR there was basically a way of us basically running through whips with the client who's in San Francisco, and like our directors and everyone kind of working stuff out in a shared space. Like, it's a VR project, but you wouldn't think it because of the final outcome is there's a different media that actually renders it. But in terms of actually like figuring that out, yeah, it had to be. So this is an earlier one, which is sort of like Google Cardboard level, where the challenge here was just to try and make it not look like a video game and look like an actual animation. It's called Rain or Shine. It's a lovely story which basically was using the only thing we had at the time, which was directed gaze in that early VR and cardboard and stuff. So you'll see the plot point in like a minute, and then I'll skip through to what the problems were. Yeah, and so, yeah, every time she presents it. But it's basically a linear story. The trouble is, where VR was in its life cycle then is everyone's constantly, it might be their first time in there, and they're constantly trying to break it and look for the edges of the experience. So you have to put all these little bits in for when they're not looking where you actually are trying to tell the story when they're going around that. So we have to put things like, these are some people at the pub, some incidental characters, and as you keep going back, and the more and more you look at them, like, but this is it's a lot of B stories, and it's a lot of animation, and you don't really want to have to like do it, but it's the challenge you have just because of where these things are in their life cycle. What you want, and as it got better and easier, we had to do less of it. So when we did Back to the Moon again for Google, against another real-time one, like the audience weren't fighting the experience all the time, and we didn't really have to do nearly as much work to sort of like direct the gauge. Also, you just get better at it. Like you figure out the languages and grammars, and it's more linear. There's less work than Rain or Shine. But the way you do it for VR is you just make it more pleasant to look where you want it to go, and so you just basically make the music a bit off if you're not looking in the right direction. And that's the trick. And those kind of things, like, they're way easier to figure out just at that trough of disillusionment. Because when people stop caring about VR, like, you can actually tell a story and make it cohesive. The AR was like hugely hyped. Is anyone messing with AR? Show of hands, roughly. Yeah, like what, apps or web stuff? Or yeah, anyone doing like Spark and Snap and all that? Yeah. It's still like really hot. Like there's still a lot of juice to sort of like squeeze out of this, and it's massively hyped. But also, it's been around for ages. Like, and it's been a novelty for ages. And this is when I was working with it first, which is like in the Flash days, Flash Toolkit. Yeah, I don't know if anyone remembers that. Igor remembers that. And then the sort of like image-based stuff. So
You thought a dollar bill was only good for buying things?
this was like really, really hot a while ago. And again, once it got past that QR code, which is kind of lame, like it's an interesting piece of technology, and then once you could finally use an actual image, just any image as a marker, then you can tell stories where there's at least some context between reality and the like virtual stuff, like the augmented things, and that's really what you're trying to do, right? If you want to actually like have a meaningful connection with people and move past that novelty part of the experience. But what's funny, like all the news stories have to explain what AR is before they can actually talk about the thing, and that's only 4 years ago. Yeah, sort of 2016, 2015, 5 years ago. It's 5 years ago because this is the Obama White House. We have not worked for the other White House. Yeah.
And they're learning something as well.
White House just launched a new app where you point your phone's camera at a dollar bill, and a 3D image of the White House pops up that you can explore. Kids call it a cool thing to play with, while Nicolas Cage called it a hidden map to unspeakable treasures.
I keep that bit in because it's cool, and also the Nicolas Cage bit, like he shows up a lot in this talk, so it lends the whole thing a semblance of coherence. And then a few years ago, Apple brought out AR Kit, you know, and this is when like AR became really like a massive thing, and it's still like there's clearly loads of work to be done because those of you who did art and design will notice that looks shit. Like that dinosaur is clearly not there because the shadows are pointing in wildly different directions, which is a hard problem to solve. Like it really, really is, and it's the thing that we first set out to do Nexus with. This thing, which is when we did an AR kit app, we're trying to figure it out. Again, really important that you get more of reality into the experience. So, you know, it's a naked fat dancing guy, and he takes you somewhere. There's not a lot of story to it because, again, it's too early for that. But you can make better illusions and a better sense of presence. So, you know, our shadows always line up and always diffuse correctly compared to where you are. And his lighting model changes, and if he goes past certain, well, really just if it's hairdressers, because we didn't spend a lot of time modeling new stuff. And I didn't remotely, because I've got the creative code on, and there's no way I could solve that from a computer vision point of view. That's really hard to like analyze the scene and figure out what direction the shadows are going. I just looked up the weather and the time of day and figured out where the sun was, because I know where you are. And that's how we do the thing. So I changed the the skybox, like between 1 of 6 skyboxes based on what the weather is, and that goes into the shader that does the shadows on the ground. And it looked like, at the time, like heads and shoulders above everything else, because you just think about, well, let's not do that. Let's think about it in a different way. Where it really fell down, and is when I'm going to start getting into the AR cloud stuff, is GPS is terrible. And those of you who remember at the beginning of phones, where we used to do that sort of figure 8 thing, we don't do that anymore. But it's not because the compass got better, which is what I hoped. It's just because that's a really annoying UI, and it's better to just like be wrong, because the compass is like terrible. So that map on the left, where my GPS thinks I am and where ARKit thinks I am. So ARKit is accurate to like roughly like a centimeter. GPS, their satellite's 22,000 kilometers in the sky. It's got a margin of error that's pretty bad. It's really, really rough. And that on the far right is my favorite ever Jira ticket, because as well as position being wrong, like I don't know where you're facing, really. Not very well, because the compass is so bad. So he will walk across the sea. Like if I haven't got a very good like bearing. And we solved it with a bunch. We didn't solve it. We made it feel like we solved it with a bunch of maths and like cool videos that go online. But the AR cloud stuff, which again, we got it because we're interested in this space. We got in really, really early, like before it became a thing. Was trying to solve this problem. And when I talk about the AR cloud, like there's lots of cool examples of it. But I like this short story from Georges Louis Burgess, like a magical realism, which is how I like to think about technology. Like amazing things that become mundane really fast. What it is just trying to build a one-to-one scale map of the entire world and place you inside that. And that's the 2 ways that we're trying to do it. And that is easier than the other way, at least to me, which is that like you teach computers to see and understand context. It's way easier to like literally model all of the world and everything in it and then figure out where you are. Because when I try to teach a computer to see, as you can see, like it gets wrong. Because I heard this in stream, I've taken out some of the other slides where like it goes really wrong when you do AI, like and gets kind of offensive. So yeah, AR cloud, persistent objects, hyperlocal, so you know exactly where you are, shared experience, and like and to some extent a contextual understanding of where you are. And that's on the far left of the graph. So all you can really do now, because like when people are interacting with it, it's all spectacle. So here are the clients. Like here are the clients who want something that is just spectacle. So the way this works is with a visual positioning system. So if you saw before, like the markers are like an image. Now if you just turn the entire scenery into the marker by extracting feature points of the architecture and then like working back using homography, you can place people really, really accurately inside a space, as long as you can spend 2 weeks in Dallas flying drones around the stadium to build up that map. And this launched last year. It is the only like 5G project I've launched, and yes, 5G is exactly what you would think it is. It's faster when it works. So that means that we could. There's the animations of volumetric video, and volumetric video is enormously large data. Like so, you've got like all the textures and which are like 4K video, and then all the geometry that's changing every scene. Again, the only reason we know about that is because we gave ourselves like a challenge years prior to make this crappy Christmas card, trying to build our own volumetric rig. Now, bear in mind, like that thing in the basement of the office, we didn't use it again. Like we rented a bunch of cameras, we figured it out, and the reason most of that video is the actual actor rather than the real thing is because it doesn't look that great. But we figured out enough so that when this stuff is coming up the slope and there's real companies like Microsoft and Intel putting actual money behind it, we understand the tools and know how to use it, and can write a simple compression algorithm and that. The other side of these things, when I'm doing AI stuff and AR, trying to teach computers to see and understand the world, I'm frankly still not very good at. But we have got a few projects that have come out that kind of use it. This is still mostly we're hired to be like an animation studio, and the only AI bit really is this sort of emotion detection thing, which you'll see this. That's Val, our PR person. Like I'm not in any of these videos in case they escape. doing very, very extreme expressions. And they have to be. Because if emotion AI was on the pink part of the graph for a reason, which is at some point someone has to tag all this data. Like there's just like farms of people tagging this data. And when I was working with it, like clearly there was dudes. Clearly it was all guys with like a very sad idea. Because anytime a woman wasn't beaming, she was angry, according to the classifier. So we had to like really sort of like separate it out. Like yeah. Where it gets really bad, like the biases in the data, again, not trying to show my stuff because I didn't know this was going out. These are, I'm punching up rather than down at least, or punching myself in the face. These are when AI is very easily, obviously racist, and which happens, again, all the time, because there's not enough sensible stuff in the training data, there's not enough representation in the teams across the thing. The problem goes from like the data all the way through the engineering team to the QA, like basically really dumb stuff is escaping out there, and this is, you know, this is live stuff. Like this is Sumerian, Azure, and Watson, and like, yeah, they're kind of offensive. But I'm not really interested in like doing useful things. I'm still only doing storytelling. So again, this is previous generation AR. We're redoing this now, and it's going to be out in a month. And the new version, the reason I'm frozen on this frame, like, is going to build on this and try and avoid the problem of, we had to fake the whole thing of the Gruffalo sort of looking around where the kids are, and what we're doing is this, like, which is this awful thing where Mary Poppins here is like a sociopath. She makes no eye contact with any of the people around her, like loving and charming as they are. She's just kind of ignoring them, even these poor penguins. And what you want is to get to like a Who Framed Roger Rabbit thing. You want the virtual characters to have some sense of presence and be there with the actual physical people, and like the effort they put in to make Bob Hoskins kind of look at that rabbit and have their eye line sort of. The only way to get that level of realism is to teach the computer to see. So working a lot now using very simple. Oh, kind of, yeah. So like, that's YOLO. It's a single shot object detector, so it runs fast and it can run on phones, and all my stuff has to run on phones, so great. It's not that hard to do at this stage now. Like the AI things are pretty much commodified, and there's useful, usable models that you can get. And then you get people like Memo, who we work with at Nexus a lot, who are genuine artists, who have been working with this for a while. So Memo, Mario Klingerman, like, the skill it takes to actually get a GAN, generative adversarial network, to actually produce something like cool and like what you actually want to do is really hard. But it's still only really good at this sort of Francis Bacon kind of thing, where really it only has like a superficial understanding of what it's looking at. But if you don't understand what's going on here, like everything in the left-hand side is real, it's like a camera feed. And then on the right-hand side, that's what the GAN is synthesizing. It's like making a thing. But this is only trained on, you know, like seascapes, and that's all it could do. So anything you put in front of it, here's a seascape. And AI is great at that. If you ask it to do like one specific thing, like, yeah, that bit with the rock is really cool. It's pretty good. Here's a bug I discovered when I was picking something up earlier, is when I tried to get the AI to synthesize a dumbbell, it always put like a mutant arm in there, because all the training data had that, like they weren't cut out. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Oh, this shouldn't be here. This is a bunch of stuff, and I thought it was a much longer talk, where I actually was going to show code and show how emotion detection is a problem and can quickly get racist, but I'll show that last slide. This is where they can go wrong really easily, because this is with sentiment analysis, and because of the negative connotations around Mexican people just in the lexicon, because this was trained only on news, it suddenly decided that Mexican food is a bad thing. Yeah, be careful with AI if you're trying to do commercial art. Here's some more GAN stuff. If you try and get like it to do like general things and just feed things into it, it's really bad. It's like a monster. So the reason I'm not showing much stuff in AI, and I'm certainly not launching anything there, is because like right now, at least for me, I do not have a handle on it in a way that I could possibly put something out there for a client where I wouldn't just worry about it all the time. On the other hand, like it's really, really good at very specific things. This model from NVIDIA is just trained on loads of celebrities, and it can hallucinate celebrities for hours. It's really good. And this is how good it's gotten just in the last 4 years. I don't have anything from 2019 or 2020 because I assume at that point it's hard to know what's real and what's not, and who's really here. So you might have heard about deepfakes, and that'll be a thing. Like that's definitely going to be a thing. Maybe clients will start asking for it because it's sort of like creeping up that slope where there's breathless articles posted on LinkedIn about deepfakes, and then they may assume anyone doing creative coding can sort of knock this stuff out for you. And it's going to be used for some truly awful things. And the nicest thing I found is the project here from a bunch of guys on the deepfakes subreddit who are just trying to put Nicolas Cage as every actor in every movie, which is a thing that you can go and find, and it's an absolute joy. How am I for time? Because how long I can run this for? A couple more minutes. It's really fun when AI gets surprising and it shows you things that work like better than you would think. Like for whatever reason, like Amy Adams does a really good Nicolas Cage. Yeah, but the GANs there are like that's still pretty simple. It's very tightly controlled what's trying to do. It's like face to face, and you've even seen that in Snap and all this sort of stuff. That stuff commodified now to the point where there are tools that will do it. And the next thing that's going to go in that space is there's now like much better temporal coherence, and the AIs are getting better at actually understanding like pose. And this is my favorite white paper of maybe the last 18 months, where these lovely grad students, like everything on the right-hand side is entirely synthesized. They, it's obviously Bruno Mars on the left, and then they use the pose, and they feed the pose data into the GAN as well. And it works incredibly well, apart from you'll see like their hands disappear, because it's really, really all about the pose stuff. So it gets really like confused in certain positions. And we're doing a lot of stuff with pose detection now in the studio. So some of it's games, some of it's like just fun, dumb stuff. But yeah, and I know it's good, isn't it? Mesmerizing. The story, because I kind of like rushed through it, is about like you can figure this stuff out. You all have, like so many of you are self-taught. It never stops, I guess is what I'd say. Like unless you want to just ride that one wave all the time. If you get bored and you get off, and then you're gonna have to like pick something out that's coming up the left-hand side and like paddle like crazy so that you can ride the wave, hopefully all the way down. And then once this stuff becomes an established, boring part of everyday life, maybe you'll stick with it, or maybe you'll go and do something else. But like, yeah, you can do this. You can do this for a long time because there's always new things to learn. All right, and that's it because I'm out of time. Thank you.
Yeah, nice one, Liam. That was really cool talk. Few minutes for questions. At the back, Anthony, that's your one.
Yeah.
Come on.
Did you manage to find a way to overcome the bias that you found in your data sets?
Personally, no. I can't afford to annotate data. So you have to pay people to do it. And if you want to be more careful, the only way I know to do it is to be more careful myself. Like, frankly, a lot of this stuff is just offshored. Like, you have to basically, to train a model, you got to like annotate thousands and thousands of images, and I'm just not the person to do that. So it's getting better, but I'm not trying to fix that myself. I'm hoping that like the big tech companies, the people pouring money into this, do it, and I just keep advising my clients like to be cautious when they are doing this, because like I say, when it goes wrong, it can go like really, really wrong. And I don't think anyone's necessarily doing this consciously, but like, yeah. And I'm hoping when it becomes viable commercially to do stuff with AI, that, you know, the experience I have of doing terrible things with AI will be handy.
Any more? Yeah.
So, by your own self-admission, you've been around for a while. What technologies that have been discarded or forgotten about do you think have been unjustly discarded or deserve to have a second look at?
I don't think anything is unjustly discarded. I definitely miss Flash because I miss when the web was weird, but like there was a very good reason it died, and it's not just because of Steve Jobs and the iPad, it's also because like so much of what we were producing was pointless, and actually like analytics kind of killed it as much as like it not working on iOS. When clients suddenly had like actual metrics for what people were doing with this stuff, they'd say, oh, I should just have a website. Like I'm just trying to communicate a simple message here. This feels like a vanity play for you guys, and it was. Like I was doing, you know, people don't have the attention span to spend 20 minutes on my PlayStation microsites like they used to. Yeah, that kind of died out. So I miss the weird stuff rather than any sort of particular technology. Everything's kind of homogenized into like a pretty safe space right now.
Any more before we take a quick break? All right, thanks, Liam.
All right, that was